You entered the Alhambra by a Saracenic cloister, from the ceiling of which an occasional lamp threw a gleam upon some Eastern arms hung up against the wall. This passage led to the armory, a room of moderate dimensions, but hung with rich contents. Many an inlaid breastplate, many a Mameluke scimitar and Damascus blade, many a gemmed pistol and pearl-embroidered saddle might there be seen, though viewed in a subdued and quiet light. All seemed hushed and still, and shrouded in what had the reputation of being a palace of pleasure. In this chamber assembled the expected guests. His Grace and the Bird of Paradise arrived first, with their foreign friends. Lord Squib and Lord Darrell, Sir Lucius Grafton, Mr. Annesley, and Mr. Peacock Piggott followed, but not alone. There were two ladies who, by courtesy, if no other right, bore the titles of Lady Squib and Mrs. Annesley. There was also a pseudo-Lady Aphrodite Grafton. There was Mrs. Montfort, the famous blonde, of a beauty which was quite ravishing and dignified as beautiful. Some said, but really people say such things, that there was a talk (I never believe anything I hear) that had not the Bird of Paradise flown in (these foreigners pick up everything), Mrs. Montfort would have been the Duchess of St. James. How this may be I know not. Certain, however, this superb and stately Donna did not openly evince any spleen at her more fortunate rival. Although she found herself a guest at the Alhambra instead of being the mistress of the palace, probably, like many other ladies, she looked upon this affair of the singing bird as a freak that must end, and then perhaps his Grace, who was a charming young man, would return to his senses. There was also her sister, a long, fair girl, who looked sentimental, but was only silly. There was a little French actress, like a highly finished miniature, and a Spanish danseuse, tall, dusky, and lithe, glancing like a lynx, and graceful as a jennet. Having all arrived, they proceeded down a small gallery to the banqueting room. The doors were thrown open. Pardon me if for a moment I do not describe the chamber, but really the blaze affects my sight. The room was large and lofty. It was fitted up as an Eastern tent. The walls were hung with a scarlet cloth tied up with ropes of gold. Round the room crouched recumbent lions richly gilt, who grasped in their paw a lance, the top of which was a coloured lamp. The ceiling was emblazoned with the Hauteville arms, and was radiant with burnished gold. A cresset lamp was suspended from the centre of the shield, and not only emitted an equable flow of soft though brilliant light, but also, as the aromatic oil wasted away, distilled an exquisite perfume. The table blazed with golden plate, for the Bird of Paradise loved splendour. At the end of the room, under a canopy and upon a throne, the shield and vases lately executed for his Grace now appeared. Everything was gorgeous, costly, and imposing, but there was no pretence, save in the original outline, at maintaining the oriental character. The furniture was French, and opposite the throne, Canova's Hebe by Bertolini, bounded with a golden cup from a pedestal of ormolu. The guests are seated, but after a few minutes the servants withdraw. Small tables of ebony and silver, and dumbwaiters of ivory and gold, conveniently stored, are at hand, and Spiridion never leaves the room. The repast was most refined, most exquisite, and most various. It was one of those meetings where all eat. When a few persons, easy and unconstrained, unencumbered with care, and of dispositions addicted to enjoyment, get together at past midnight, it is extraordinary what an appetite they evince. Singers are also proverbially prone to gourmandize, and though the Bird of Paradise unfortunately possessed the smallest mouth in all of Singingland, it is astonishing how she pecked. But they talked as well as feasted, and were really gay. It was amusing to observe, that is to say, if you had been a dumbwaiter, and had time for observation, how characteristic was the affectation of the women. Lady Squibb was witty, Mrs. Annesley refined, and the pseudo-Lady Afy fashionable. As for Mrs. Montfort, she was, as her wont, somewhat silent, but excessively sublime. The Spaniard said nothing, but no doubt indicated the possession of Cervantic humour by the sly calmness with which she exhausted her own waiter and pillaged her neighbour's. The little Frenchwoman scarcely ate anything, but drank champagne and chatted with equal rapidity and equal composure. "Prince," said the Duke, "I hope Madame de Herstein approves of your trip to England?" The prince only smiled, for he was of a silent disposition, and therefore wonderfully well suited his travelling companion. "Poor Madame de Herstein!" exclaimed Count Frill. "What despair she was in when you left Vienna, my dear Duke! Ah, mon Dieu! I did what I could to amuse her. I used to take my guitar and sing to her morning and night, but without the least effect. She certainly would have died of a broken heart if it had not been for the dancing dogs." "The dancing dogs!" minced the pseudo-Lady Aphrodite. "How shocking!" "Did they bite her?" asked Lady Squibb, "and so inoculate her with gaiety?" "Oh, the dancing dogs, my dear ladies! Everybody was mad about the dancing dogs. They came from Peru, and danced the mazurka in green jackets, with a jabot. Oh, what a jabot!" "I dislike animals excessively," remarked Mrs. Annesley. "Dislike the dancing dogs!" said Count Frill. "Ah, my good lady, you would have been enchanted. Even the Kaiser fed them with pistachio nuts. Oh, so pretty, delicate little things, soft shining little legs, and pretty little faces. So sensible, and with such jabots!" "I assure you they were excessively amusing," said the prince, in a soft, confidential undertone to his neighbour Mrs. Montfort, who, admiring his silence, which she took for state, smiled and bowed with fascinating condescension. "And what else has happened, very remarkable Count, since I left you?" asked Lord Darrell. "Nothing, nothing, my dear Darrell. This betise of a war has made us all serious. If old Clamstandt had not married that gipsy little Dugiria, I really think I should have taken a turn to Belgrade." "You should not eat so much, Poppet," drawled Charles Annesley to the Spaniard. "Why not?" said the little French lady, with great animation, always ready to fight anybody's battle, provided she could get an opportunity to talk. "Why not, Mr. Annesley? You never will let anybody eat. I never eat myself, because every night, having to talk so much, I am dry, dry, dry. So I drink, drink, drink. It is an extraordinary thing that there is no language which makes you so thirsty as French. I always have heard that all the southern languages, Spanish and Italian, make you hungry." "What can be the reason?" seriously asked the pseudo-Lady Afy. "Because there is so much salt in it," said Lord Squibb. "Delia," drawled Mr. Annesley, "you look very pretty to-night." "I am charmed to charm you, Mr. Annesley. Shall I tell you what Lord Bonmot said of you?" "No, ma mignonne. I never wish to hear my own good things." "Spoiled, you should add," said Lady Squibb, "if Bonmot be the case." "Lord Bonmot is a most gentlemanly man," said Delia, indignant at an admirer being attacked. "He always wants to be amusing. Whenever he dines out, he comes and sits with me half an hour to catch the air of Parisian badinage." "And you tell him a variety of little things?" asked Lord Squibb, insidiously drawing out the secret tactics of Bonmot. "Beaucoup, beaucoup," said Delia, extending two little white hands sparkling with gems. "If he come in ever so, how you call it, heavy, not that, in the dumps. Ah, it is that. If ever he come in the dumps, he goes out always like a souffle." "As empty, I have no doubt," said Lady Squibb. "And as sweet, I have no doubt," said Lord Squibb, "for Delcroix complains sadly of your excesses, Delia." "Mr. Delcroix complain of me? That indeed is too bad. Just because I recommended Montmorency de Versailles to him for an excellent customer, ever since he abuses me, merely because Montmorency has forgot, in the hurry of going off, to pay his little account." "But he says you have got all the things," said Lord Squib, whose great amusement was to put Delia in a passion. "What of that?" screamed the little lady. "Montmorency gave them to me." "Don't make such a noise," said the Bird of Paradise. "I never can eat when there is a noise. St. James," continued she in a fretful tone, "they make such a noise." "Annesley, keep Squib quiet." "Delia, leave that young man alone. If Isidora would talk a little more, and you eat a little more, I think you would be the most agreeable little ladies I know. Poppet, put those bonbons in your pocket. You should never eat sugar plums in company." Thus talking agreeable nonsense, tasting agreeable dishes, and sipping agreeable wines, an hour ran on. Sweetest music from an unseen source ever and anon sounded, and Spiridion swung a censer full of perfumes around the chamber. At length the Duke requested Count Frill to give them a song. The Bird of Paradise would never sing for pleasure, only for fame and a slight check. The Count begged to decline, and at the same time asked for a guitar. The Signora sent for hers, and his Excellency, preluding with a beautiful simper, gave them some slight thing to this effect. Charming Bignetta, what a gay little girl is charming Bignetta. She dances, she prattles, she rides and she rattles, but she always is charming, that charming Bignetta. Charming Bignetta, what a wild little witch is charming Bignetta. When she smiles I'm all madness, when she frowns I'm all sadness, but she always is smiling, that charming Bignetta. Charming Bignetta, what a wicked young rogue is charming Bignetta. She laughs at my shyness, and flirts with his highness, yet still she is charming, that charming Bignetta. Charming Bignetta, what a dear little girl is charming Bignetta. Think me only a sister, she said trembling, I kissed her. What a charming young sister is charming Bignetta. He ceased, and although the Ferrarese to choicer music chimed his gay guitar in Estes halls, as Casti himself, or rather Mr. Rose, choicely sings, yet still his song served its purpose, for it raised a smile. "I wrote that for Madame Sapiepha at the Congress of Verona," said Count Frill. "It has been thought amusing." "Madame Sapiepha!" exclaimed the Bird of Paradise. "What! That pretty little woman who has such pretty caps?" "The same. Ah, what caps! Mon Dieu, what taste! What taste!" "You like caps, then?" asked the Bird of Paradise with a sparkling eye. "Oh, if there be anything more than other that I know most, it is the cap. Here, voici," said he, rather oddly unbuttoning his waistcoat. "You see what lace I have got? Voici. "Ah me! What lace! What lace!" exclaimed the bird in rapture. "St. James, look at his lace. Come here, sit next to me. Let me look at that lace." She examined it with great attention, then turned up her beautiful eyes with a fascinating smile. "Ah, c'est joli, n'est-ce pas? But you like caps. I tell you what, you shall see my caps. Spiridion, go, mon cher, and tell Mamselle to bring my caps. All my caps, one of each set." In due time entered the Swiss with the caps, all the caps, one of each set. As she handed them in turn to her mistress, the bird chirped a panegyric upon each. "That is pretty, is it not? And this also. But this is my favorite. What do you think of this border? C'est belle? Cette garniture? Et ces jabots, c'est très séduisant, n'est-ce pas? My voici, the cap of the Princess Liechtenstein. C'est superbe. C'est mon favori. But I also love very much this of the Duchess de Berry. She gave me the pattern herself, and after all, this cornet à petite santé of Lady Blaise is a dear little thing. Then again, this coiffe dentelle of Lady Macaroni is quite a pet." "Pass them down," said Lord Squib. "We want to look at them." Accordingly they were passed down. Lord Squib put one on. "Do I look superb, sentimental, or only pretty?" asked his lordship. The example was contagious, and most of the caps were appropriated. No one laughed more than their mistress, who, not having the slightest idea of the value of money, would have given them all away on the spot, not from any good-natured feeling, but from the remembrance that to-morrow she might amuse half an hour buying others. While some were stealing, and she remonstrating, the duke clapped his hands like a caliph. The curtain at the end of the apartment was immediately withdrawn, and the ball-room stood revealed. It was of the same size as the banqueting hall. Its walls exhibited a long perspective of gilt pilasters, the frequent piers of which were entirely of plate-looking glass, save where occasionally a picture had been, as it were, inlaid in its rich frame. Here was the Titian Venus of the Tribune, deliciously copied by a French artist. There the Roman Fornarina, with her delicate grace, beamed like the personification of Raphael's genius. Here Zuleika, living in the light and shade of that magician Guercino, in vain summoned the passions of the blooming Hebrew. And there Cleopatra, preparing for her last immortal hour, proved by what we saw that Guido had been a lover. The ceiling of this apartment was richly painted and richly gilt. From it were suspended 3 lustres by golden cords, which threw a softened light upon the floor of polished and curiously inlaid woods. At the end of the apartment was an orchestra, and here the pages, under the direction of Karlstein, offered a very efficient domestic band. Round the room waltzed the elegant revellers. Softly and slowly, led by their host, they glided along like spirits of air, but each time that the duke passed the musicians, the music became livelier and the motion more brisk, till at length you might have mistaken them for a college of spinning dervishes. One by one an exhausted couple slunk away. Some threw themselves on a sofa, some monopolized an easy-chair, but in 20 minutes all the dancers had disappeared. At length Peacock Piggott gave a groan, which denoted returning energy, and raised a stretching leg in air, bringing up, though most unwittingly, on his foot one of the bird's sublime and beautiful caps. "Hullo, Piggott! Armed cap o' pied, I see," said Lord Squib. This joke was a signal for general resuscitation. Here they lounged in different parties, talking on such subjects as idlers ever fall upon, now and then plucking a flower, now and then listening to the fountain, now and then lingering over the distant music, and now and then strolling through a small apartment which opened to their walks, and which bore the title of the Temple of Cnidos. Here Canova's Venus breathed an atmosphere of perfume and light, that wonderful statue whose full-charged eye is not very classical, to be sure, but then how true. Lord Squib proposed a visit to the theatre, which he had ordered to be lit up. To the theatre they repaired. They rambled over every part of the house, amused themselves, to the horror of Mr. Annesley, with a visit to the gallery, and then collected behind the scenes. They were excessively amused with the properties, and Lord Squib proposed they should dress themselves. Enough champagne had been quaffed to render any proposition palatable, and in a few minutes they were all in costume. A crowd of queens and chambermaids, Jews and chimney-sweeps, lawyers and charlies, Spanish dons and Irish officers, rushed upon the stage. The little Spaniard was Almaviva, and fell into magnificent attitudes with her sword and plume. Lord Squib was the old woman of Brentford, and very funny. Sir Lucius Grafton, Harlequin, and Darrell, Grimaldi. The prince and the count, without knowing it, figured as watchmen. Squib whispered Annesley that Sir Lucius O'Trigger might appear in character, but was prudent enough to suppress the joke. The band was summoned, and they danced quadrilles with infinite spirit, and finished the night at the suggestion of Lord Squib by breakfasting on the stage. By the time this meal was dispatched, the purple light of morn had broken into the building, and the ladies proposed an immediate departure. Mrs. Montfort and her sister were sent home in one of the Duke's carriages, and the foreign guests were requested by him to be their escort. The respective parties drove off. 2 cabriolets lingered to the last, and finally carried away the French actress and the Spanish dancer, Lord Darrell and Peacock Piggott. But whether the two gentlemen went in one, and two ladies in the other, I cannot aver. I hope not. There was at length a dead silence, and the young Duke was left to solitude, and the Signora. Squib's Prom, the Young Duke, Charles Annesley. Dandy has been voted vulgar, and beau is now the word. I doubt whether the revival will stand, and as for the exploded title, though it had its faults at first, the Muse or Byron has made it not only English but classical. However, I dare say I can do without either of these words at present. Charles Annesley could hardly be called a dandy or a beau. There was nothing in his dress, though some mysterious arrangement in his costume, some rare simplicity, some curious happiness, always made it distinguished. There was nothing, however, in his dress which could account for the influence which he exercised over the manners of his contemporaries. Charles Annesley was about 30. He had inherited from his father, a younger brother, a small estate, and though heir to a wealthy earldom, he had never abused what the world called his prospects. Yet his establishments, his little house in Mayfair, his horses, his moderate stud at Melton, were all unique, and everything connected with him was unparalleled for its elegance, its invention, and its refinement. But his manner was his magic. His natural and subdued nonchalance, so different from the assumed non-emotion of a mere dandy, his coldness of heart, which was hereditary, not acquired, his cautious courage, and his unadulterated self-love, had permitted him to mingle much with mankind without being too deeply involved in the play of their passions, while his exquisite sense of the ridiculous quickly revealed those weaknesses to him which his delicate satire did not spare, even while it refrained from wounding. All feared, many admired, and none hated him. He was too powerful not to dread, too dexterous not to admire, too superior to hate. Perhaps the great secret of his manner was his exquisite superciliousness, a quality which, of all, is the most difficult to manage. Even with his intimates he was never confidential, and perpetually assumed his public character with the private coterie which he loved to rule. On the whole, he was unlike any of the leading men of modern days, and rather reminded one of the fine gentlemen of our old brilliant comedy, the Dorimants, the Bellairs, and the Mirabelles. The fussy hostess. Men shrink from a fussy woman, and few can aspire to regulate the destinies of their species, even in so slight a point as an hour's amusement, without rare powers. There is no greater sin than to be a trop prononcée. A want of tact is worse than the want of virtue. Some women, it is said, work on pretty well against the tide without the last. I never knew one who did not sink, whoever dared to sail without the first. Loud when they should be low, quoting the wrong person, talking on the wrong subject, teasing with notice, excruciating with attentions, disturbing a tete-a-tete in order to make up a dance, wasting eloquence in persuading a man to participate in amusement whose reputation depends on his social sullenness, exacting homage with a restless eye, and not permitting the least worthy knot to be untwined without their divinity-ship's interference, patronizing the meek, anticipating the slow, intoxicating with compliment, plastering with praise that you may in return gild with flattery, in short, energetic without elegance, active without grace, and loquacious without wit, mistaking bustle for style, raillery for badinage, and noise for gaiety. These are the characters who mar the very career they think they are creating, and who exercise a fatal influence on the destinies of all those who have the misfortune to be connected with them. Public speaking. Eloquence is the child of knowledge. When a mind is full, like a wholesome river, it is also clear. Confusion and obscurity are much oftener the results of ignorance than of inefficiency. Few are the men who cannot express their meaning when the occasion demands the energy, as the lowest will defend their lives with acuteness, and sometimes even with eloquence. They are masters of their subject. Knowledge must be gained by ourselves. Mankind may supply us with facts, but the results, even if they agree with previous ones, must be the work of our own mind. To make others feel, we must feel ourselves, and to feel ourselves, we must be natural. This we can never be when we are vomiting forth the dogmas of the schools. Knowledge is not a mere collection of words, and it is a delusion to suppose that thought can be obtained by the aid of any other intellect than our own. What is repetition, by a curious mystery, ceases to be truth, even if it were truth when it was first heard. As the shadow in a mirror, though it move and mimic all the actions of vitality, is not life. When a man is not speaking or writing from his own mind, he is as insipid company as a looking-glass. Before a man can address a popular assembly with command, he must know something of mankind, and he can know nothing of mankind without he knows something of himself. Self-knowledge is the property of that man whose passions have their play, but who ponders over their results. Such a man sympathizes by inspiration with his kind. He has a key to every heart. He can divine in the flash of a single thought all that they require, all that they wish. Such a man speaks to their very core. All feel that a master hand tears off the veil of cant, with which, from necessity, they have enveloped their souls. For cant is nothing more than the sophistry which results from attempting to account for what is unintelligible, or to defend what is improper. Female beauty. There are some sorts of beauty which defy description and almost scrutiny. Some faces rise upon us in the tumult of life like stars from out of the sea, or as if they had moved out of a picture. Our first impression is anything but fleshly. We are struck dumb, we gasp for breath, our limbs quiver, a faintness glides over our frame, we are awed. Instead of gazing upon the apparition, we avert the eyes, which yet will feed upon its beauty. A strange sort of unearthly pain mixes with the intense pleasure, and not till, with a struggle, we call back to our memory the commonplaces of existence, can we recover our commonplace demeanor. These, indeed, are rare visions. These, indeed, are early feelings, when our young existence leaps with its mountain torrent